tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So Ajahn asked if I would augment the P.A. Parito readings with different Dhamma talks. And today, specifically in honor of Ajahn Chah Memorial Day, he asked that I read a teaching from Ajahn Chah. So, starting at the beginning of the Collected Teachings, Chapter 1, page 1, The Middle Way Within. The teaching of Buddhism is about giving up evil and practicing good. Then, when evil is given up and goodness is established, we must let go of both good and evil. We've already heard enough about wholesome and unwholesome conditions to understand something about them. So I'd like to talk about the middle way, that is, the path to transcend both of those things. All the Dhamma talks and teachings of the Buddha have one aim, to show the way out of suffering to those who have not yet escaped. The teachings are for the purpose of giving us the right understanding. If we don't understand rightly, then we can't arrive at peace. When all the Buddhas became enlightened and gave their first teachings, they pointed out these two extremes, indulgence in pleasure and indulgence in pain. These two types of infatuation are the opposite poles, between which those who indulge in sense pleasures must fluctuate, never arriving at peace. They are the paths which spin around in samsara. Footnote, wheel of existence, literally perpetual wandering, the continuous process of being born, growing old, and dying again and again. The enlightened one observed that all beings are stuck in these two extremes, never seeing the middle way of Dhamma. So he pointed them out in order to show the penalty involved in both. Because we are still stuck, because we are still wanting, we live repeatedly under their sway. The Buddha declared that these two ways are the ways of intoxication. They are not the ways of a meditator, not the ways to peace. These ways are indulgence in pleasure and indulgence in pain, or to put it simply, the way of slackness and the way of tension. If you investigate within, moment by moment, you will see that the tense way is anger, the way of sorrow. Going this way, there is only difficulty and distress. If you've transcended indulgence and pleasure, it means you've transcended happiness. Happiness and unhappiness are not peaceful states. The Buddha taught to let go of both of them. This is right practice. This is the middle way. These words, the middle way, do not refer to our body and speech. They refer to the mind. When a mental impression which we don't like arises, it affects the mind and there is confusion. When the mind is confused, when it's shaken up, this is not the right way. When a mental impression arises which we like, the mind goes to indulgence and pleasure. That's not the way either. We people don't want suffering, we want happiness, but in fact happiness is just a refined form of suffering. Suffering itself is the coarse form. You can compare it to a snake. The head of a snake is unhappiness. The tail of the snake is happiness. The head of this snake is really dangerous. It has poisonous fangs. If you touch it, the snake will bite straight away. But never mind the head. Even if you go and hold on to the tail, it will turn around and bite you just the same, because both the head and the tail belong to the one snake. In the same way, both happiness and unhappiness, or pleasure and sadness, arise from the same parent, wanting. So when you're happy, the mind isn't peaceful. It really isn't. For instance, when we get the things we like, such as wealth, prestige, praise, or happiness, we become pleased as a result. But the mind still harbors some uneasiness because we're afraid of losing it. That very fear isn't a peaceful state. Later on, we may actually lose that thing and then really suffer. Thus, if you aren't aware, even if you're happy, suffering is imminent. It's just the same as grabbing the snake's tail. If you don't let it go, it will bite. So whether it's the snake's tail or its head, that is, wholesome or unwholesome conditions, they're all just characteristics of the wheel of existence, of endless change. The Buddha established morality, concentration, and wisdom as the path to peace, the way to enlightenment. But in truth, these things are not the essence of Buddhism. They're merely the path. The Buddha called them Magga, footnote, path, specifically the path to the cessation of suffering. The Buddha called them Magga, which means path. The essence of Buddhism is peace, and that peace arises from truly knowing the nature of all things. If we investigate closely, we can see that peace is neither happiness nor unhappiness. Neither of these is the truth. The human mind, the mind which the Buddha exhorted us to know and investigate, is something we can only know by its activity. The true original mind has nothing to measure it by. There's nothing you can know it by. In its natural state, it is unshaken, unmoving. When happiness arises, all that happens is that this mind gets lost in a mental impression. There's movement. When the mind moves like this, clinging and attachment to those things come into being. The Buddha has already laid down the path of practice in its entirety, but we've not yet practiced, or if we have, we've practiced only in speech. Our minds and our speech are not yet in harmony. We just indulge in empty talk. But the basis of Buddhism is not something that can be talked about or guessed at. The real basis of Buddhism is full knowledge of the truth of reality. If one knows this truth, then no teaching is necessary. If one doesn't know, even if he listens to the teaching, he doesn't really hear. This is why the Buddha said, "The enlightened one only points the way. He can't do the practice for you, because the truth is something you cannot put into words or give away." All the teachings are merely similes and comparisons, means to help the mind see the truth. If we haven't seen the truth, we must suffer. For example, we commonly use the term sankhara, footnote, formation, compound, when referring to the body. Anybody can say it, but in fact we have problems simply because we don't know the truth of these sankhara and thus cling to them. Because we don't know the truth of the body, we suffer. Here's an example. Suppose one morning you're walking to work and a man yells abuse and insults at you from across the street. As soon as you hear this abuse, your mind changes from its usual state. You don't feel so good. You feel angry and hurt. That man walks around abusing you night and day. Whenever you hear the abuse, you get angry, and even when you return home, you're still angry because you feel vindictive. You want to get even. A few days later, another man comes to your house and calls out, "Hey, that man who abused you the other day, he's mad, he's crazy, has been for years. He abuses everybody like that. Nobody takes any notice of anything he says." As soon as you hear this, you're suddenly relieved. That anger and hurt that you've pent up within you all these days melts away completely. Why? Because you know the truth of the matter now. Before you didn't know. You thought that the man was normal, so you were angry at him. Thinking like that caused you to suffer. As soon as you find out the truth, everything changes. Oh, he's mad. That explains everything. When you understand this, you feel fine. because you know for yourself. Having known, then you can let go. If you don't know the truth, you cling right there. When you thought the man who abused you was normal, you could have killed him. But when you find out the truth, that he's mad, you feel much better. This is knowledge of the truth. Someone who sees the Dhamma has a similar experience. When attachment, aversion, and delusion disappear, they disappear in the same way. As long as we don't know these things, we think, what can I do? I have so much greed and aversion. This is not clear knowledge. It's just the same as when we thought the madman was sane. When we finally see that he was mad all along, we're relieved of worry. No one can show you this. Only when the mind sees for itself can it uproot and relinquish attachment. It's the same with this body which we call sankhara. Although the Buddha has already explained that the body is not substantial or a real being as such, we still don't agree. We stubbornly cling to it. If the body could talk, it would be telling us all day long, you're not my owner, you know. Actually, it's telling us all the time, but it's Dhamma language, so we're unable to understand it. For instance, the sense organs of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body are continually changing. But I've never seen them ask permission from us even once. Like when we have a headache or a stomach ache, the body never asks permission first. It just goes right ahead, following its natural course. This shows that the body doesn't allow anyone to be its owner. It doesn't have an owner. The Buddha described it as an object void of substance. We don't understand the Dhamma, and so we don't understand these sankhara. We take them to be ourselves as belonging to us or belonging to others. This gives rise to clinging. When clinging arises, becoming follows. Once becoming arises, then there's birth. Once there's birth, then old age, sickness, death, the whole mass of suffering arises. This is the paticca samuppada, footnote. Dependent co-arising, dependent origination, the description of the arising and ceasing of the five khandhas. This is the paticca samuppada. We say ignorance gives rise to volitional activities. They give rise to consciousness and so on. All these things are simply events in the mind. When we come into contact with something we don't like, if we don't have mindfulness, ignorance is there. Suffering arises straight away. But the mind passes through these changes so rapidly that we can't keep up with them. It's the same as when you fall from a tree. Before you know it, thud, you've hit the ground. Actually, you've passed many branches and twigs along the way, but you couldn't count them. You couldn't remember them as you passed them. You just fall and then thud. The paticca samuppada is the same as this. If we divide it up as it is in the scriptures, we say ignorance gives rise to volitional activities. Volitional activities give rise to consciousness. Consciousness gives rise to mind. And consciousness gives rise to mind and matter. Mind and matter give rise to the 6 sense spaces. The sense spaces give rise to sense contact. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling gives rise to wanting. Wanting gives rise to clinging. Clinging gives rise to becoming. Becoming gives rise to birth. Birth gives rise to old age, sickness, death, and all forms of sorrow. But in truth, when you come into contact with something you don't like, there's immediate suffering. That feeling of suffering is actually the result of the whole chain of the paticca samuppada. This is why the Buddha exhorted his disciples to investigate and know fully their own minds. When people are born into the world, they are without names. Once born, we name them. This is convention. We give people names for the sake of convenience, to call each other by. The scriptures are the same. We separate everything with labels to make studying the reality convenient. In the same way, all things are simply sankhara. Their original nature is merely that of compounded things. The Buddha said that they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. They're unstable. We don't understand this firmly. Our understanding is not straight, and so we have wrong view. This wrong view is that the sankhara are ourselves. We are the sankhara. Or that happiness and unhappiness are ourselves. We are happiness and unhappiness. Seeing like this is not full, clear knowledge of the true nature of things. The truth is that we can't force all these things to follow our desires. They follow the way of nature. Here's a simple comparison. Suppose you go and sit in the middle of a freeway with the cars and trucks charging down at you. You can't get angry at the cars shouting, "Don't drive over here, don't drive over here." It's a freeway, so you can't tell them that. So what can you do? You get off the road. The road is the place where cars run. If you don't want the cars to be there, you suffer. It's the same with sankhara. We say they disturb us, like when we sit in meditation and hear a sound, we think, that sound's bothering me. If we understand that the sound bothers us, then we suffer accordingly. If we investigate a little deeper, we'll see that it's we who go out and disturb the sound. The sound is simply sound. If we understand like this, then there's nothing more to it. We leave it be. We see that the sound is one thing and we are another. One who understands that the sound comes to disturb him is one who doesn't see himself. He really doesn't. Once you see yourself, then you're at ease. The sound is just sound. Why should you go and grab it? You see that actually it was you who went out and disturbed the sound. This is real knowledge of the truth. You see both sides, so you have peace. If you see only one side, then there's suffering. Once you see both sides, then you follow the middle way. This is the right practice of the mind. This is what we call straightening out our understanding. In the same way, the nature of all sankhara is impermanence and death, but we want to grab them. We carry them about and covet them. We want them to be true. We want to find truth within the things that aren't true. Whenever someone sees like this and clings to the sankhara as being himself, he suffers. The practice of Dhamma is not dependent on being a monk, a novice, or a layman. It depends on straightening out your understanding. If our understanding is correct, we arrive at peace. Whether you are ordained or not, it's the same. Every person has the chance to practice Dhamma, to contemplate it. We all contemplate the same thing. If you attain peace, it's all the same peace. It's the same path with the same methods. Therefore, the Buddha didn't discriminate between laymen and monks. He taught all people to practice in order to know the truth of the sankhara. When we know this truth, we let them go. If we know the truth, there will be no more becoming or birth. How is there no more birth? There's no way for birth to take place because we fully know the truth of sankhara. If we fully know the truth, then there's peace. Having or not having, it's all the same. Gain and loss are one. The Buddha taught us to know this. This is peace. Peace from happiness, unhappiness, gladness, and sorrow. We must see that there is no reason to be born. Born in what way? Born into gladness. When we get something that we like, we're glad over it. If there's no clinging to that gladness, there's no birth. If there's clinging, this is called birth. So if we get something, we aren't born into gladness. If we lose something, we aren't born into sorrow. This is the birthless and the deathless. Birth and death are both founded in clinging to and cherishing the sankhara. So the Buddha said, "There's no more becoming for me. Finished is the holy life." Footnote, the celibate life, often referring to the monastic life. There's no more becoming for me. Finished is the holy life. This is my last birth. There. He knew the birthless and the deathless. This is what the Buddha constantly exhorted his disciples to know. This is the right practice. If you don't reach it, if you don't reach the middle way, then you won't transcend suffering.
Any questions, thoughts? Today's the anniversary of Ajahn Chah's passing away. It was 28 years ago, something like that. And yesterday and last night I spent quite a bit of time watching the gathering at Wapapa, one of the wonders of technology. Also, still I'm not able to sleep at night, so I was up late last night listening to Dhamma talks. One of the things that really struck me was, one is, of course, how just the gathering of people, the faith that people still have, and the impact that Ajahn Chah had on people, and is still resonating today with many people, say, who are gathered at Wapapa, both monastics as well as the lay people, would never have actually met Ajahn Chah or seen him teach. But still, there's the impact, and of course that's part of what brings everybody here as well. It's in the same way that when the Buddha himself taught, it wasn't a matter of say, the Buddha doing the practice for him, or by the sight of the Buddha one is somehow magically transported to the enlightened realms. What the Buddha left was the Dhamma and the Vinaya, the teaching and the training. And similarly, the emphasis that Ajahn Chah made, not so much on his person, or his personality, but his the importance that he placed on the teaching and training, on the putting into practice the teaching, so that that's always available to us, and so that being able to recollect that and to bring that to mind, and to encouraging ourselves to practice, to train, to steep ourselves in this Dhamma Vinaya, in this teaching and training.
Yesterday also Luang Por Pen passing. Can you tell the story again? At Wapapong, Luang Por Pen give you the teaching.
Right. Yeah, Luang Por Pen. Of course, he's one of the great sort of disciples in the Ajahn Man tradition. He was a disciple of Ajahn Goma, and he's 91 when he passed away. And Ajahn Kassapa was referring to an occasion when, at the funeral ceremony of Ajahn Chah, of course I was part of the organizing team, and so I had a radio, and I could hear when different things were happening or different requests came out, and then I heard over the radio that Ajahn Bannon showed up, and nobody knew he was coming. He just showed up, and it was probably about 9 o'clock at night or something. So he waited until in the afternoon, late afternoon, the king and queen and prime minister, heads of the military and whatnot, all the Puba, big officials, all of that. He waited for all of that to die down before coming to Wat Pah Pong. So then he went straight out to the jetty, and I'd been quite busy with the preparations, actually for a couple of years, and of course during the actual ceremonies, then I was very busy, and so I went out and paid respects to him at the jetty. He was sitting out there with a bunch of monks and a few lay people around him, and he'd come just to pay respects to Ajahn Chah, and so then I had known him and paid respects to him on a couple of occasions, few occasions, and he'd always been very kind to me, and so then I went and I paid respects, and I said, and I was tired, and I paid respects and then said to him, I've been really busy with this with all the ceremonies, and after it's over, I think I really need some time to be, have some solitude or some quiet, and so maybe I'll come up and spend a bit of time with you at your monastery. And he got really fierce with me, and he said, no, you don't. He said, it's all right here. And he just pointed to his heart. He just sort of, basically, sort of like, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You've got everything you need already. Don't give that any space. Don't indulge. And it was really, it was a great teaching. It was very kind. And sometimes the teacher's kindness comes in different ways. And he was also seen as somebody who was very fierce, which I never really, I never felt that. I always felt as similar to Ajahn Mahabua. Yes. People tended to be terrified of him. He was extremely, compassionate and keen to support people in their practice. Okay, so we can take the opportunity to have a break and take the day as a day of remembering Ajahn Chah, dedicating our practice to the legacy of Ajahn Chah, but also the dedicating it to ourselves in terms of teachers show the way, and we have the opportunity to fulfill that and to plug into that legacy. But it's up to us to do it.